Culture. What is cultural? What does culture mean? I had a question in my mind earlier about family, collective, whatever. Like the whole. So beyond one form. And in my spirit, the word cultural dropped in. And as I do, and like the stretch word, so my mind started stretching the word, and it saw, so when you break it apart, cult, you're all. Cultural. Cultural. Cult, you're all. And it made me think, okay, so maybe culture, so the different cultures, cultural, there are these many cults. And I know that word is a little, whatever, however you feel. But from a complete linguistics, like just looking at the words, the letters, and what they form, it just made me think, let's see the dots that we connect, because my mind is thinking about cultural, 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 and splitting it apart, and it needs a space to sort it out. So let's try it. Um, I have my experimental glasses on, so I'm a scientist. We're gonna find out. So I'm not quite sure where this is gonna take us, so we're gonna have our focus. I'm setting it with intention on the word cultural, and we're gonna find out what that means to, I guess, my brain. And then I'm sharing it. So, dear diary, what does cultural mean? I think it's just simple. I mean, think about it. Families, in ancient times, families would live together for generations and generations, and they'd move and travel together, like for the survival, to just survive in on Earth and in this universe. They had to travel as packs. So our world has shifted, obviously, from the type of caveman world that we've read about. But in these ancient times, where it was survive, like if you were alone, you would die. So doesn't that make sense that our system, the old programming, um, where the time to feel most at peace with your own self, like, is a lonely moment. In the Bible, it says all the time in the New Testament that Yeshua went to a lonely place. He was alone. He would go be with his people, and then he'd go and escape and be alone. They always said, like, they could never find him. Have you watched The Chosen? Great. But anyways, I haven't finished it. Mental note, finish it. So I guess my point is that we're pack animals, but at the same time, are we pack animals because it was out of survival? Or maybe it was at one point. And so now, though, it's shifted. It's that if we're alone, I mean, death is an illusion, so we don't necessarily die. Like, everybody dies. But it's not the fact that you are physically alone that that is, like, it's not going to kill you. I think that idea is definitely a major fear that probably comes from that time where that literally would have happened. Like, if you were by yourself out in the wilderness of the feral world and you weren't more feral than the animal form that was coming to you, then that was your end. And so now, where humanity has developed and evolved, we sit here, like I'm sitting here on my own in front of a screen. And I think, I mean, I don't share that same, I used to share that same fear of being alone. I think as similar as I could imagine it. It was terrifying to be alone with myself. Now, it's my happy place. But so what shifted, right? In our culture. So maybe there's been culture shifts every generation, every year, every moment, really. Like, look at how we live now and this current culture. There's economic culture, there's art, creative culture, there's all different types of culture, not just backgrounds where you come from. I mean, we use this word and we use language so loosely. I think, like, what is also like a culture? So, like, if you have to go and get blood or anything drawn, they take a sample, which is also called, right, in a lab, a culture. That's interesting. So, I'd like to know the etymology and roots in ancient history. There's so much I look up. I love looking up words, and I have not looked up anything for this word with intention because I just wanted to see what stream of consciousness would come up with just with the word itself. How many connections can we make? Because one of the things I realized, again, is that I'm not my thoughts, right? And I know this is words, but really what I was thinking about it with is because the word cultural fell into my spirit. So that's a thought. It's a thought form. And it came in and I'm like, okay, because it was an answer to a question that I had. And so the answer was culture, cultural. So now I have the word and the answer, but I want the story. I want more details. I want to understand cultural. I want to understand it on a deeper level. And because they just gave me a word, it feels like it's just a clue. It's not necessarily the answer, it's just the clue. Um, so on to the next. Cultural. I don't know. I'm going to let it be. Let's drop it for now. I think it's funny. Why are people afraid of the word cult? Are people afraid of the word cult? I remember reading this book as a kid that it was one of those books where you got to choose your destination. So like you would read and it'd say, if you want this, you choose here and you jump to this page. And I remember the first time I read through the book, I ended up in a cult. And I remember like, okay, do over, let's try this again. And but that stuck with me because I thought it was so funny that how easily I ended up right in a cult by the choices that I made in that entertainment process. So that's funny. Because I don't know, in my mind, I think, what if that main idea, so we can call it a cult, like people call church a cult. Don't yell at me, but it's just another group of people. If all we think of a cult is a group of people, I mean, there's definitely levels I could imagine. I don't know why I'm talking about cults. I really don't, but maybe this is the fear gap to get to the information. Who knows? Maybe this is just weird. Maybe it's all of it. Maybe I don't need to understand that. I think it's interesting because I think that part, I think a lot of things are interesting. I love interesting. So, anyways, the fear is just information. So, the idea that I must have been afraid of something for this idea and concept of cult, which was attached to fear, that like this fear of like, oh my gosh, because in my mind, what a cult was is this concept of this group of people that are being brainwashed and like can't leave. So they come in and it basically they're completely devoted to these leaders and these things, but it's all outside of themselves, and they all operate together. But there's this element, I guess the element that I felt fear about was like this element though of this brainwashing that you didn't even know you were in it, but then once you like wake up in it, you can't leave. So it kind of sounds like the awakening process, doesn't it? Hmm. It's kind of interesting, huh? You wake up to this reality and you start seeing different things, then you're like, are they all in a cult? But then it's this they, but it's out of my subconscious me. So am I brainwashing myself? Have I been brainwashing myself? or was I brainwashed? I came into an old programming system that out of like literally generations from wombs and wombs and wombs and wombs and historical, which is all information that we have access to upon our cults. But um, that word, it doesn't feel scary anymore because that feels silly. Like the idea is real, right? Like brainwashing, hypnosis, we can hypnotize ourselves. That's neuroplasticity. I like neuroplasticity. Intentional reprogramming with the loops that I desire. And then when they stop serving me, let's put new ones in. It's all information. And so it's interesting that this word cult, and this is English, so I'm really curious what other languages, how they interpret the idea of like the smaller collectives. So like groups. So in the Bible, it also says like mind, like kind, right? Like in Genesis in the beginning, after God created the beings or the animals, and so the fish of the sea and the birds of the air, so like mind, like kind, like mind, like kind, and then the humans, like mind, like kind, the animals, the fireman, all of that. It was all this pattern of like mind, like kind. And isn't that interesting though? It says like mind. Whose mind? So whose mind are we alike to? Or is it all one mind? Are we sharing one collective mind? And since this is one big dream world, so I was thinking about lucid dreaming before. Now we're here. Um, and I was watching videos about lucid dreaming. And again, there's a whole world. Like you go into the internet and there's a lot of worlds out there and a lot of different cultures. Everything, anything that you could imagine or even want. There's people out there that you can just like anything. Go and find something that you have not found. Like if you haven't found that other people are interested or talking or anything about it, then that's obviously for you to start because it just hasn't been manifested yet. And that's your brainchild. Kudos to you. So anyways, back to the cult. I don't know. It's just such an interesting concept, though. Maybe it's just the way that my mind thinks of it. But, because when you learn about propaganda, at least for me, when I learned about propaganda as a kid, I remember thinking, oh my gosh, they've been brainwashing us and we didn't even know it, all these subliminal messages. And then my mind was just like so enamored with the fact that like they go so much that even some things, when you reverse the sound or there's sound underneath and messages, like all the subliminal messaging, there's so much subliminal messaging. But in the same way, instead of being like, oh my god, they're taking over my brain with subliminal messaging, I thought like, okay, cool, I don't really want to be doing what they want me to be doing. So what if I subliminally message myself and I brainwash myself and I hypnotize myself? And so in that way, really, it was a dissolution or a dissolutioning, because it's still ongoing, um, of identifying the old programming, of being like, oh, not mine, old cult. I don't know, that word is so funny. Cult. Cult. And I studied um, the ancient history of Hebrew, the Hebrew people and Judaism, well, Hebraic culture, really in depthly for a few years. I love the culture. I love it with my full being, from what I was able to dive into out of my perspective. And I participated in Feast of Tabernacles a couple of years where I went with a group of people and we camped, tent camped, and yes, I understand calling it tent camping shows you how often I tent camped. So, but I did it. I went, and it was like literally, it was like a home away from home, a retreat center. I never felt anything like it. I came in blind. It was October, cold in Michigan, but just we stayed dry. It was me and my boys, and we had the best time. there were kids and they were homeschooled at that time, so there was other homeschool kids, so they played and they were feral and they were all doing on golf carts having fun. It was huge property. And the adults would hang out in the barn, and it was a huge space, and there was a guest like singer and speaker couple, and we would just be there together all day for like 8 days camping, so eating together, and we had this huge communal feast, and we'd all come in, we dance, we sing, we have ceremony, all of it was so fun. And then we'd have beach days, we just though did life together, and different people who had knowledge and different that would teach. So like during off time or whatever, I learned about foraging. We got to try some of her stuff. Like she foraged a whole bunch of stuff and then made us actual root beer and like gummy mushrooms that she used the chocolate, like all of this stuff. It was so cool. And it just opened my mind, but I never felt more free in that environment. I went back the next year and it had shifted, but it was so, it's same idea as it doesn't, the concept, the feeling inside of me, I guess that was what I really enjoyed. It was this connection that I was free to just, I had a space. This community held a space where I was free, and it felt like freedom for the first time. I danced. I was me. I did not care. I was fully, I dropped all of the cares for 8 days with a group of strangers, and we got so close. It was a cool experience. I celebrated Passover many different ways. I held Passover in my own way on my own house, and I went full in. And my personality, when I want to learn about something, I go all in and embody it. Like in order to understand it for me, I have to embody it and feel it and experience it. It's not enough to just understand it here. And usually it doesn't stay there. I know, at least in my own pattern, if it's something that is just understood here, then it's not going to stay there. I'm going to live it. And so before, like in my book, every single one of my pieces is lived and experienced. That is taken from raw material of just data dump pour outs and then reconfigured and constructed. But every single time I touched each piece, I would relive that type of experience, but in a different way and get a different truth or different. So it was, it's an experience. This is what this life is. And it's amazing. And really, really, the life is the healing. It's quite wonderful, to be honest. So I don't know what cultural actually means, and it's just fun to drop in and think about words and what they could possibly mean. And I know I could just go look it up in a dictionary and to find out what the Webster's dictionary definition of something is, but sometimes it's more fun to say, do you know what does it mean to me? Because there's so much hidden in our language. And that's the fun part. I don't know. I remember as a kid learning about the secret codes and all these different ways to communicate. And I didn't come up with the word cultural. It just dropped in my spirit. I thought of it. I had a question and it came as a thought form, and I heard it in my head, and now I'm here. But that's all thought is. I don't know. It's pretty cool. I don't know where I'm going with this. I think that was just the point, to share. Sometimes it's just fun to be weird. So, I don't know. What do you think? What are your thoughts on what does cultural mean? What's your thoughts on cult? Let's start there. Okay. I love you, weird friend. Live love and remember, peace.
Cult friend.